Hey folks out there in Meet in the Middle Chronicles, this is Norman Papoose and Sam Collins coming to you from the Hitchcock Public Library. We're trying something new today. We're doing Facebook Live. And with us is John Machol, who is a former project manager with the Army Corps of Engineers. We asked him to come talk to us about what's going on and with the protection from hurricanes. You know, we have the coastal spine that's being spoken about. We have the ring levies that are being spoken about. Congressmen, the Texas legislature, everybody's getting into this act. And so we thought we might bring you a different perspective, because personally, we just feel that one perspective is dominating the conversation. And this is, a little bit of a different look. So John, before we start, why don't you tell us your background with the Army Corps of Engineers and what you've done in the past and why we brought you here.
Well, I was project manager for the Corps of Engineers in regulatory for about 25 years, and then I moved over into project management. I was on a temporary assignment when Ike hit. And after I took care of my house, I came back to work, and they dragged me up into the colonel's office and they said, "Hey, what do you know about Public Law 84-99? I said, I think it was written in 1984. Other than that, I don't have a clue. And I said, why? And they said, well, you need to go find out what that law is about and then come back and tell us. So that is the law that says if you have a flood control project that was previously authorized and you've been maintaining it, and something happens, like Category 3 or greater happens, and you have more than $1 million of damage, there's about 4 different things you have to qualify for. And once that happens, if you meet those criteria, then the U.S. government, or through the Corps of Engineers, will repair your project, which is a huge deal.
Right.
You know? And
speak up a bit just to make sure that we have the volumes going.
So that meant I became the project manager for the repair of the Galveston Seawall, the repair of the Texas City Dike, and the Freeport flood wall, and also the Port Arthur flood wall.
Okay, so just to review, the Freeport flood wall, the Port Arthur flood wall, the Galveston Seawall, and the Texas City Dike, you were in charge of those repairs, overseeing those repairs after Hurricane Ike.
Yes.
So right now, you are the only person really who has done a flood control project, in the area that they're talking about, the coastal spine.
Right, and now I have always been amazed that there isn't a ring levee already in Galveston, because this is not a new technology. I didn't invent ring levees. Levees are a 200-year-old technology, and it's basically you protect the area that you're trying to protect, and they've done it in Freeport and they've done it in Texas City. And you know how in Texas City it's just a U-shaped thing,
right?
Because they've backed up into a hill. Basically, the elevation is higher inland as you go inland, and so they just put a wall around it, and that protects the entire area. I was going to show you. I brought this visual aid.
We spare no expense. Spare no expense.
Well, when I got the email at 7:30 this morning, do you have any visual aids? I went, I guess I better put something together. But you can imagine this is the ring levee, and we're going to tailor it to Galveston. All right, so this is the front of the seawall. It would be along harbor side. This would be the levee on the placement area. And then this would be something along the west end. All right, so as the water rises, the wall keeps the water out. And the pumps and anything that gets through, or rainwater, then gets pumped out. But if you were to take that concept and then blow out the back of the box, how much water do you think you could keep out of it then?
Right, none.
None. And that's basically the situation we've got right now. And they have been thinking about doing, let's get rid of the...
So let's get rid of that idea.
Let's get rid of
We got rid of that idea pretty quick.
Yeah, the concept is very simple. The location of it is the problem. Now, back after Ike, I volunteered to be on that Galveston Recovery Committee.
Mm-hmm.
Remember, that was 300 of our closest friends that got together and volunteered to look at this issue, and we had the largest public participation process ever in the United States at that time. And we had a series of public meetings, and we gathered input from...
When you say we, that was the committee?
The committee.
That
And
was
I was
put together by the city?
By the City of Galveston.
Okay.
And I was the head of the infrastructure subcommittee. So things like the levee and the Ike Dike were all part of that committee. Now, Bill Merrill was involved too, but he basically said, well, we've already got it figured out. We're gonna do the Ike Dike, and we don't need to talk about anything else. But the reality is, a lot of people were concerned about flooding, existing flooding, and they came out in large numbers to those meetings and said that they were in favor of a ring levee. Now, to listen to the story today, you'd think that never happened. But
So there was a formal document put together
yes,
by the subcommittee of the overall committee that the City of Galveston had asked to be
Right.
formed,
right,
and your committee was the infrastructure committee.
right. And the results of that study were we were given a community development block grant of $500,000 to further study a ring levee, and that money just disappeared. I don't know whatever happened to it. But
500,000?
500,000.
That seems to be a going number in the county now.
Yeah.
Of 500,000 missing here, 500,000 missing there.
Well, because they'll pick up as soon as $501,000.
It is a trigger.
Yeah, it's a trigger.
But interestingly enough, there were two different gifts to the Ike Dike study by the city and the Port of Galveston that seemed to add up to about $500,000.
And to trigger me again, when every time you mention the port,
There it goes.
the port was crying poverty every single year, yet they found $250,000 to give to study the one solution to a coastal barrier system that the who's who of Galveston wanted, and I'm going to get somewhere here on this.
That's okay.
And stopped with the committee's recommendation on all other studies. They had a myopic focus on the Ike Dike.
Yeah.
And when I'm going to read this email, parts of this email. Now, this email came to me when I was on city council, and I'm not going to tell you who it is, but you can consider it kind of a deep throat person from NOAA, Corps of Engineers, somebody of that stature in a senior role. And it was not only sent to me, it was sent to two other council members. And I'm not going to read it all, but I'm going to read some portions that I believe are relevant to our conversation today. I attended the presentation by Dr. Merrill. It was full of attacks on all the normal process for getting federal funds to approach a project as massive as the Ike Dike, and had no actionable study results for which Galveston's donations to the project, over $1 million to date, were given. The main focus of Dr. Merrill and his team seemed to be to influence our politicians to let the Ike Dike concept go around the federal process and do only studies that support the Ike Dike. He attacks the Speed Center's approach of proposing local protections like the Centennial Gate at the Houston Ship Channel and a ring levee around Galveston as dangerous, but also admits in his presentation that such local protections may be needed to keep flooding out of communities even with the Ike Dike. If Galveston wants to be prepared when the opportunity arises to move forward with flood protections, the city should be considering its local options for protection. Let me repeat that. The city should be considering its local options for protection. Those local protections are mostly part of the Ike Dike anyway, and within the scope of the normal Army Corps of Engineers planning process. Now again, I'm not going to tell you who sent this to me, but I will tell you it was somebody senior in NOAA or Army Corps of Engineers. Does that jive with your?
It really does. I think it is obvious that it was a propaganda campaign to support the Ike Dike, or the coastal barrier as it's become known, and to the exclusion and the vilification of every other plan. I was just at that public hearing meeting, and I heard prominent city citizens, I should say, that didn't have any political position, but they had big opinions that a ring levee would be catastrophic for Galveston, and I'm not sure how you would consider a flood control project to be catastrophic for anybody. I mean, one of the problems is that when you politicize a project before you've done the engineering, people are commenting on a project that may or may not be accurate. And if you just want to find fault with something, that makes it real easy. But the kind of levee that we were talking about was much more modest than made it into the Corps' final plan. And every option that they're showing shows a ring levee, because as I was with my common sense thing, if you don't have a backside to your wall, you're going to get flooded.
And I'm Joe Public and don't have the background and didn't.
Hey Joe, nice to meet you.
Yeah, didn't get the degree of how to destruct a cardboard box. But for
Well,
Joe
actually,
Public,
I learned that in kindergarten.
Yeah. How tall would the levee have been? And for the public, that maybe there's people on the mainland that think, okay, if you build this wall, the water's going to go somewhere.
Yeah.
Does it come into the mainland, or what happens? I know you're protecting Galveston. That's just a question.
Right. That was part of the. We're looking at an example that one of my neighbors, Bill Keeney, had provided.
Yeah. And we'll have this on as an attachment.
Along with others. It depends on where you put the thing. Somebody's going to have to decide what it is we're trying to protect. And that's a big problem, in that if you put it here, it's going to protect these people, but it won't protect those people on the other side of the wall. There's always going to be some haves and have-nots in a situation like that. And but once you decide what it is you can protect, then you can design a wall. So you can't design a wall just based on protecting everything, because then it becomes 18 feet tall is what they were saying in the latest Corps thing. We were thinking something more along the lines of about an 8-foot wall, because you know what happened during Ike, when the wind came around, it pushed the water that was already sitting there back into town, and an 8-foot wall would have protected the entire Offutt's Bayou area if the wall was outboard of Offutt's Bayou. But
so just an 8-foot wall would have protected all that flooding that came up into
in my house.
Yeah, yeah, mine too.
Yeah,
but
because I live west of 61st Street. I live in Colony Park, and that was a 70s subdivision that was built slab on grade, not like the elevated homes on the west end. But if you remember, the same thing happened in 1979 when the Corps proposed a solution to that kind of hurricane flooding by putting a ring levee around Galveston. And at that time, the West End developers were totally against it because they believed it would mean they were sending a signal that if you don't live inside the ring levee, your property is not valuable, will be doomed, and so we won't be able to develop the West End. But the reality is they developed the West End anyway. There's multi-million-dollar homes out there. They're elevated, and like Bolivar, those elevated homes are, you know, the ones that are built to code survive hurricanes.
Right.
Yeah. So that's
And which is not really an option for me. I can't retrofit my house
to raise.
to raise it.
So let's get on one thing that there was a Mays Middleton, who's our new state representative, came out against the Ike Dike, and it appears, I don't want to say this factually, but it appears that his one of his motivations for coming out against it, and I applaud his courage in doing so, and in front of all the people that are trying to push it through, is that the people of Bolivar are saying if you put the coastal spine in and raise the road, everything between the road and the dike and the Gulf of Mexico is going to get wiped clean. The next Cat 3, Cat 4 comes through.
Right.
Do they have a point?
Well, yes. I mean, wherever you put a wall, if it's not at the beach, then everybody to the north of it is going to get.
It was south of the wall.
South of the wall.
Yeah.
I do the same
north
thing.
and south.
Yeah.
But yes, that is true. Now, I mean, there are so many moving parts in this plan that it's really difficult. And by bundling,
When you say this plan, are you talking about the coastal spine, the big one?
I'm talking about the new plan that includes a coastal spine and a ring levee and I believe other protections up into the bay. So whenever you put a line on a map, then all of a sudden people come out of the woodwork and they're against it. I believe that the ring levee has been vilified to the point where people are saying, oh, it'd be catastrophic for the island if you put in the levee, which is just totally ridiculous. It would set up a problem, as you see here, if you're going to put it along this alignment.
And he's pointing to an area from the Gulf up towards Tycoon.
Yeah, over
Past the
by
airport.
the airport. Everybody to the west of the airport is left out of it. Now, if you look at those houses, though, they've all been elevated, so it shouldn't be too much of a problem. But if you're going to tell people that that's bad for everyone, people are not going to be able to make a distinction between it being bad for you if you're down on 37th Street. Oh, it must be bad for me too. But these objections are not based in science at all. And they're being done as a reactionary thing to just keep everybody in line with the Ike Dike. Now, I think that's a problem on several levels, but I think it's a failure of our elected officials to do something that will protect the majority of their citizens. And now they've just abdicated their responsibility. They're not doing anything. And they haven't been since the 70s, when it would have been a lot easier to do it,
In a way, it's almost like setting up a New Orleans Katrina situation again. In New Orleans, they were told the levees need to be repaired, they need to be built up, and they kept putting the money elsewhere until
Yeah.
Katrina came, and it was a complete disaster. And so what you're saying is that they've had the motivation and the resources, to get this done since the 70s,
Yeah.
but they haven't done anything. But now they have, the Ike Dike that everybody wants to put their name on, which has a host of problems on it. And if I'm right, the ring levy you're speaking of, is part of the Ike Dike system anyway.
Yes. I think the Corps realizes, as anybody knows anything about water would, that you've got to have a back on your wall. You got to have four sides on your box, or it doesn't work well. And the amount of water that's in Galveston Bay right now is plenty enough. If it was blocked off like they're talking about during a storm, in advance of a storm, that water could still do the same thing through the sèche method, which is a French word that means sloshing.
Mm-hmm.
You push the water up one way, and then you let go of it all of a sudden, or when the wind switches around, it comes back and it splashes back
Yeah,
up.
it's like the kid with his ducky in the bathtub.
Exactly.
Water goes
Big
everywhere.
bathtub. I mean, there's a lot of documented history about sèches that have done tremendous damage. Okefenokee Swamp was one of the ones,
Okefenokee, yeah.
and there was another one that happened in Alaska in the 70s. But the fact that it might be difficult should not be a reason to stop you from doing anything.
Mm-hmm.
The seawall was a difficult project. The grade raising was a difficult project, but they did it. And within 5 years of the storm, of the 1900 storm, they had already built the first section of seawall. And they did 2 more projects to bring it out to where it is now. It's just a shame that no one ever was able to convince them to complete the rest of the box. But
Right.
that was, once again, that was because of the fear, which I believe is totally unfounded fear, that there would be no more development.
Now, speaking of when you say development, a lot of that's property rights. Texas is probably the most conservative property rights state in the union. And I know that there are people who are concerned about the Army Corps coming in and taking the land, by force through eminent domain.
Yeah.
But that would have to happen, wouldn't it?
Undoubtedly, but I don't think near as much has to be taken as being proposed by the fearmongers that are trying to sell this Ike Dike. Because they're still thinking that they're going to be able to do the Ike Dike and not do a ring levee. It's just not going to protect the island. So you could see a scenario where they build this massive barrier, and all the way from Freeport to High Island, and Galveston would still get flooded when the wind switches around after the storm goes in.
Bayside.
Right.
It's still the same problem. There's a lot of water in there.
Yeah.
Now people are, I think, really underestimating the reality of the models that have been done. And I find it really bizarre that my school, Texas A&M, at Galveston.
Oh, here we go.
So I went to school here in Galveston, but I also went to school in Virginia. I went to graduate school, and
Let's meet in the middle, so we got both sides covered.
But now I don't want to sound elitist because I don't know everything about water, but I've been studying water and environmental issues for my whole life. And I find it bizarre when I'm having to debate someone who doesn't know the first thing about a levee, trying to tell me that a levee is bad for people. Levees are good for people. I mean, the people in Texas City would tell you.
Yeah.
They've been protected by that levee many times, and it's really really paid off for them.
He
Well,
said,
after taking my entry level course, I mean, I'm ready to go to the second level.
There you go.
But
John said something before we started taping that he said actually I could quote him on that I think is one of the most prescient things I've ever heard about Galveston Island, and he said they won't let you into the room unless you have a conflict of interest. Think about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, so one of the things I propose is tell the big construction guys that they could make a lot of money by building a ring levee, and maybe their greed will, help them do something that's good for the rest of the people.
Now, maybe you know the answer to this question, maybe you don't. But I was told, one of the key characteristics of the Ike Dike coastal spine is the gates into the Houston Bay.
Yeah.
I have been told that they don't even know if the soil under the water can support the gates yet. There's been no testing done.
Well,
do you know if that's a correct statement?
I think that's probably true. Now, let me tell you how I come to this. I worked on a lot of projects, including highway projects, the 87 project, where they want to rebuild the road, and they've talked about building bridges. I've been involved in a lot of those discussions. And when TxDOT was trying to put in a bridge, they did the testing and they found it couldn't support the bridge pilings. I'm not sure, but they appear to be on the same magnitude as something like that. So that's why I think that the $32 million estimated project cost for the entire barrier is
Million or billion?
Billion,
right.
with a B. I think it's a little low, because I think when they get out there and they sink pilings and they just don't go anywhere.
Right.
I mean, there's no bedrock.
So
down
I really want to get this point across. The Army Corps did soil studies on a bridge that would replace the
there. Well,
Galveston
actually,
Ferry.
I think it was the Highway Department or
The Highway Department.
or TxDOT.
And they found that the bed of Houston Bay, which is close to where this gate, Ike Dike gate is supposed to be, could not support the bridge.
Right. And there's been a number of attempts at it, but that's not the only problem. I mean, when you get a big old barrier like that in a moving body of water, that they have to dredge the ship channel all the time.
Right.
It's constant. If you're expecting your gate to be lowered in the time of emergency and for everything to fit right, I think you're being naive. There you go.
yeah.
It's not a great idea to expect that it's going to keep working.
So
I mean, there are little bitty floodgates along the Intercoastal Canal that the Corps has had to repair occasionally. They fill in, and it keeps them from working. So you can't close it if there's something in the way.
mhm.
Yeah.
So,
it has to be
so
clear,
we could easily have a problem where the maintenance costs are so expensive that they don't come up with the money one year, and then that year there'd be a storm, and they wouldn't be able to close the gate. So you have this big gate that you can't use.
Can't operate.
Now that, I'm talking through my hat. I don't really know that much about the gates.
Mhm.
But I think that is a really ambitious project. It's 2 miles across that opening. That's a lot. That's a lot of area,
It's a lot of engineering.
a lot of engineering, and it's engineering at sea. It's not like building something in your backyard where you can, just tough through it. You're having to get on a boat, so it's weather dependent. It's, there's moving water. It just, everything becomes more difficult when you have to go to sea.
Mhm.
It's like, the old adage about repair works on a plumbing at your house is X. It's 10X if it's a boat.
If it's on about, yeah.
You know, I mean, there's a reason for that.
Or maintaining a house that was built in 1990 versus a house that was built in 1890.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The I think that letter, even though it may be a few years old, is still right on in its assessment that this is a con job that they're trying to propose the Ike Dike. I'm not really sure about the motivation. You propose that it's ego, you know, to get their name on a bill. I think there might be something more financial involved. Obviously, there's been a lot of people that have gotten free rides over to Amsterdam. You know, I don't see how going to a shrimp dinner in Amsterdam makes you an expert on coastal flooding.
Now, I'm not aware that I know there were a lot of trips to Amsterdam, but I want to be clear, I don't have any proof that they were free. I know a lot of people went on their own dime, and they're kind of the influencers of the island.
Yeah.
But I don't
But
want to.
do those people have any background in flood control?
No, none of the ones no.
And do they care about the people that would be left out? I mean, when you say, "Oh, we can't have a ring levy," you're basically dooming the people in Galveston to continued flooding. Now, one other thing I wanted to bring up: if they put a ring levy in and they put in pumps, if they did that, they could keep up with the constant street flooding that we're having now. But the reason I say they have vilified the ring levy is because I've seen things written about how the pumps would fail and we'd be drowning like they did in New Orleans. Well, you can't say the pumps have failed when you haven't even put them in yet. I mean, that's just nuts.
Yeah, and the pumps didn't fail in New Orleans, from what I understand.
No, they didn't.
They were just overwhelmed because the levee wasn't maintained.
Really was a levee failure.
Yeah.
Because, and that's one of the things you have to watch out for every time you make an improvement on a seawall. Every time you drill a hole in there to put a parking meter in, you've weakened the cap of that structure. And when we were repairing it after Ike, the blowouts that were happening in the sidewalks all came where there was a drainage flow through the seawall out on the face of it down onto the sand.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the areas that blew out and the sidewalks collapsed under there.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, that seawall is an amazing thing, but it was built to break waves.
Mm-hmm. So
and it works good, and it's been working good for 100 years.
Yeah, great leadership by Ike Kempner and company back in the day. But I want to wrap it up, and I want to make sure that we're clear on one thing, and that is we're here talking about the best way to protect the island. And I think if I'm reading you right, please tell me if I'm not, and if I'm reading the letter right from kind of our deep-throated NOAA/Army Corps of Engineers, it's not that the Ike Dike concept should be stopped at all costs. It's that all the ideas were not equally considered, and the best methods for deciding how to protect the island or the mainland were not put through because of forces other than engineering and science forces. There was more political forces wanting to push one solution.
Right. Well, I think that's probably pretty accurate. I would add a couple of things that one of the things that they didn't like the way the process was going, so they proposed a new process. Basically an end run around the Corps' review process. I also think that the Corps has ignored some of our findings from 10 years ago that had a much more reasonable ring levy. So yeah, I think you're right. I think that the Corps has been pushed into ignoring some of the comments, some of the existing solutions, and that the entire project is going to suffer because of it.
Mhm.
Because now we've got everybody fighting about it. All of a sudden everybody's an expert on ring levies being bad and Ike Dike is best. But you've got to take the emotion out of. You've got to leave it to the engineers. But it's got to be politicians that tell the engineers what it is they're going to protect. But right now they're not protecting anything. And this constant argument is going to cause, well, I predict that the Congress is going to say, well, those people in Bolivar can't agree with the people in Galveston, so let's just talk about something else and, a farm bill or something.
Right.
I mean, 50 million or $30 billion or $20 billion. I mean, as we were talking earlier, they're having a little trouble with a $5 billion border wall right now.
Mhm.
Can't even get the funding for that. This is 5 times or 4 times bigger. And,
Actually, at least 6 times
well,
bigger.
yeah, I'm not the mathematician. But I appreciate the chance to be able to come in and talk to you guys about it. I mean, I've just about given up because even though I used to know a lot about this, it appears that my opinion is just the same as everybody else's. We've kind of lost the ability to listen to experts, and there's a kind of an attack on science.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, we'd like to thank you in the spirit of our red, white, and blue. We have all colors covered today. This is our first Facebook Live video. Meet in the middle, Sam Collins.
Norman Papoose and John Machol, former Army Corps Engineer Project Manager. Please share this video. A lot of people need to know everything that's going on with this. It's a lot of money, it's a lot of effort, and everybody needs to be educated. So we urge you not only to share this video, but to find out more on your end about how this might affect you and our community. Thanks for watching.